She don't be no good for you, and she don't.
That's Vertical Horizon. See?
Well, who knew? Not Savage Garden.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down to Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass.
Welcome back to Shat the Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, then this is the podcast for you. I am one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me is my co-host, Ash Little Old Me Hurley.
Hi, y'all.
And each week, we take a look back in time to decide if our favorite films still hold up. The movies we cover are chosen by you, the listeners, who generously commission the films you love. If you'd like to see all the movies we have covered, will cover, want to choose one for yourself, please visit shatpod.com and have a look. At the end of each podcast, we'll provide you, the audience, the number of wipes each movie takes to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. It's how we help the podcast grow. Additionally, subscribe to our sister podcast, Shat on TV. Review TV series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, Lovecraft Country, and Watchmen. Find all information and past episodes at shatpod.com/TV. And finally, if you'd like to hang out with us live, follow and subscribe to our Twitch channel, shatpod.com/Twitch, and our YouTube channel, where we play video games, host watch parties, and edit this podcast live. And if you haven't checked out our YouTube channel lately, I have been updating it with lots of 360 footage, mostly of Big D going to the bathroom at the side of the road. But you can follow up. We are posting some more video footage there that's a little bit outside of just doing the podcast, and blooper reels from different recordings that we do. So do get yourself subscribed to that. We really appreciate you watching. All that being said, Ash, what movie are we reviewing tonight?
Well, you know, Gene, last week we delved into kind of absurdist comedy with Chris Elliott and Cabin Boy. We had a nice little trip down memory lane, kind of linking it to Adam Sandler and all of the different comedies that we would come to enjoy. And this week, we are going back a full decade into the 1980s and taking a turn of a different type of comedy. This is a movie that came out in 83, a great year, if I do say so myself, since it's the year I was born. And it is a film that came from a director that I think a lot of people out there are familiar with. Pretty sure all of you are, one by the name of Martin Scorsese. But it is a film that I myself and a lot of people I talked to had no clue had ever been done before. It's one that kind of has been a hideout. And this is going to be the DeNiro Scorsese meetup, the king of comedy. Well, and the commissioner tonight that brings us this movie is Charlie. And this is not Charlie's first go-round with Shat. He previously brought us the absolutely incredible Boogie Nights, fantastic episode. And tonight he's bringing us another one that I think I'm pretty excited to get into with you. Because again, I think myself, you, a lot of listeners out there are going to be surprised by this one. And Charlie wrote in and explained why he wanted to commission this film. And he said, Shatos, it's been a minute. I hope you all are well. I'm still a loyal listener, but things have changed since my last commission 2 years ago. Certainly the world has changed a lot, but personally at the time of writing this, things have changed a lot in my life. I moved from Ventura to LA and I'm engaged and we're tying the knot in Malibu in June of 23. Oh God.
Hope things are still going well, Charlie.
Jesus. So while there's happy anniversary. So while there's been a lot of change, one thing has remained the same. I'm still a loyal Shat listener. Last time I commissioned Boogie Nights, it was truly an amazing pod, but there were a few other movies that were in the money. And I'm glad to see that one I had in mind hasn't gotten the Shat treatment. I'm, of course, talking about Marty Scorsese's classic, The King of Comedy. It's a great film, and in my opinion, a top 5 Scorsese film. But I'm interested to hear what the crew thinks about it. I first came to this movie when I was finishing undergrad at the ripe old age of 29, and one of my professors had mentioned in conversation that it was one of their favorite films. I hadn't heard of it, but was interested in watching it since it seemed like it would be right up my alley, and oh boy, was it ever. I love the dark humor, and De Niro's performance as Rupert Pumpkin is a masterful thing, as he somehow finds a way to endear the psychopath to the audience. For those of you in Shat Nation who like Todd Phillips' The Joker, you'll probably enjoy this one as well, since it clearly had a huge influence on how Todd Phillips wanted to approach the film. I hope you all enjoy it, but either way, looking forward to a great pod. Your ride or die, Charlie in LA.
Well, Charlie, thank you so much for this commission and really exposing us to this. Like Ash was mentioning, you have impeccable taste in film, both in Boogie Nights and The King of Comedy. And I'm glad that this hadn't been done. Frankly, I was not even familiar with it, but it's got all the elements of a great film, from a fantastic cast to a fantastic director, and really coming out in an era where it allows us to compare it to other movies of its vintage to see just what kind of quality we get out of it. And as Ash said, congratulations, happy anniversary. Hope things are going well. The King of Comedy is a 1983 satirical black comedy directed by Martin Scorsese and starring Robert De Niro, Jerry Lewis, and Sandra Bernhard. In the film, which focuses on celebrity worship and American media culture, an aspiring stand-up comedian kidnaps his idol and blackmails his TV network. The film received mostly positive reviews from critics, but was a flop at the box office, grossing only $2.5 million against its $19 million budget. So, Ash, we always ask where you were and what your memories are of the movie. Let's start with you. What do you know about The King of Comedy?
So I kind of already alluded to it. Like, I'd never seen this before. I don't think I'd ever heard of it before. When you had messaged in Slack, like you said, Ash, it's going to be just you and me. We're going to be solo, just like kind of like a duo thing this weekend. And we're doing the Kings of Comedy. I hadn't even looked it up yet. And I thought this was that compilation comedy sketch with like Cedric the Entertainer and like the guy that does Family Feud now.
Bernie Mac.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that's what we're doing. And then I looked it up and I was like, Robert De Niro. And it was really pleasantly surprised. I love De Niro. Who doesn't? Martin Scorsese. I mean, I absolutely loved The Departed. I loved most of his films. And I had really high hopes because I started reading some reviews of it. And so I was really grateful to Charlie out there for putting this one on my radar.
I'm in the same boat. As I mentioned on the Do the Right Thing podcast, the Spike Lee film that I was most familiar with before watching Do the Right Thing was the original Kings of Comedy. And I was so confused when Charlie dropped this commission on our doorstep. I was like, oh shit, there was an 80s version of the original Kings of Comedy. No, this is something totally different. It is a Scorsese and De Niro picture I hadn't seen, not a mob movie. Let's hit the trailer.
And I'm thinking as I'm sitting here now, well, maybe this is my big break. This is my big chance. You know what I mean?
You don't just walk onto a network show without experience. Now, I know it's an old hackneyed expression, but it happens to be the truth. You got to start at the bottom.
I know, that's where I am, at the bottom.
That's a perfect place to start.
So will you please give your warmest greetings to the newest King of Comedy, Rupert Pupkin.
His name is Rupert Pupkin. He lives in a world of make-believe.
Oh, Jerry, I love this guy. Always coming up with these great lines. I love him.
Nobody can remember his name.
Mr. Pipkin. Mr. Pupnik.
Mr. Puffer.
Rupert.
Pupkin, Pupkin.
But by 11:30 tonight, the whole world will know that Rupert Pupkin is the new King of Comedy. Robert De Niro, Jerry Lewis, in a Martin Scorsese picture. The King of Comedy.
Rupert Pupkin is an aspiring yet delusional stand-up comedian trying to launch his career. After meeting Jerry Langford, a successful talk show host, Rupert believes his big break has finally come. He attempts to book a spot on Langford's show, but is continually rebuffed by Langford's staff, particularly his secretary, Kathy Long, and finally by Langford himself. Along the way, Rupert indulges in elaborate and obsessive fantasies in which he and Langford are colleagues and friends.
The opening of this movie is pretty great because it shows the way that these fan-obsessed crowds are. And, there's been a lot of controversy lately. There's this guy, his name's Jordan Fisher. You probably don't know him out there, but he is starring in Hadestown on Broadway. And he just made a lot of news lately. A lot of people are really just trashing him online. He had to cancel his TikTok account because he said he's not going to do stage door anymore because people were just such assholes at the stage door, trying to get his autograph. And people were like, it's so chill. It doesn't matter. You're being a dick. And then I realized watching this is really what stage doors are like. It's these crazy people who are just attacking Jerry, trying to push, get his autograph, get in his car. It has to be terrible to be a famous person like this. And it made me question, why would anybody ever want to be famous? I get wanting to be wealthy. I get wanting to make millions of dollars on films. I get wanting to do your art, like the people who truly like want to like showcase their art, which is acting. I understand that. But the people who just want to get famous, I think they're delusional, because think about it. You got to be willing to put up with crazy people. You have to act like they're interesting when most of the time they aren't. You also have to act like they have some ownership over your time in person, which I feel like is obscene. There's no way I could do any of those things. I have a hard enough time like working with people that I don't particularly get along with, and that's like 3 people. I can't imagine it doing it with all these hordes of people. And the opening of this movie shows that, and through showing that, it really brilliantly sets up these 2 characters and their dynamic. You've got Jerry, who's like done with the fame game, and you've got Rupert, who wants nothing more than for the fame game to become his life.
I feel like Charlie's Commission is a really good example of what you're describing here. Charlie's Commission came before his wedding in 2023, and we're just getting to it now. Why? Because we're 3 people who have to come together once a week, despite all the other things that we have in our lives, to put together this podcast. And yes, we love doing it. There's not that there's a lack of passion or a lack of care. It's a lack of capacity. And so if you imagine you're a famous person, and you've got to keep in touch with all those people. I have enough trouble like keeping in touch with my mom, spending time with my wife, like seeing my friends. And so you multiply that by thousands or millions. How are you supposed to keep up with that? It's not that people are assholes or they don't want to be your friend, but imagine, you're trying to just get through your week and people are trying to stop you for autographs, take photos with you, etc. I've been incredibly fortunate to have built friendships with some of our listeners online through the Discord. I've met Nick, one of our listeners, in person in Nashville. Great experiences. Everyone has been fucking awesome, right? Paul and I write each other. We ship each other gifts and stuff. Very cool. But I have been fortunate. We've been lucky because I am deeply worried that one of these days a listener is going to show up at my house or hack my accounts. Like, we're not that good at hiding, right? We're not very good at it all. Or meet me somewhere and not be mentally stable. All it takes is one person, right? And I'm not saying that like I'm going to suffer some physical harm or something like that, but the awkwardness and how horrible that situation is going to be when you have to tell a person, listen, you have to go away. Like, we're not real friends in real life.
People are so kind on social media. Like when my grandmother died, like all these people reached out to me that, have been listeners for all these years. Like, we're not famous, right? Like, we have a niche group of like weirdos that are weirdos like us. People who are obsessed with movies, people who are obsessed with pop culture and like just want to get together and be nostalgic. I can't imagine like a Timothy Chalamet, right? Like where he's got these people that are just beyond obsessed with him, these millions of people that are after him. It sounds awful.
Recently, my friends Seth and Rachel and I were outside of a health concert. It's not a huge band, right? But they've got a following, sold out shows. And we walk around the corner and there's Jake from Health and Chino Moreno, who's in Crosses now. Nobody's around them. And we started talking about how cool it'd be to like go get a photo with these 2 guys, right? Like, when are you going to see Chino and Jake from Health like hanging out on the corner in Mesa, Arizona? I didn't have the nerve to ask, though. Like, I couldn't bring myself to do it. And I've always been like this. I've always felt bad about it, whether it was like getting autographs or photos of famous people. I just can't bring myself to ask. And so I'll tell stories about, I met this person. Even if I've had a conversation with them, I just don't want to bother them for the autograph or the photo. At the same time, though, I think like it's got to be somewhat flattering, right? To know you have fans, like especially if there's asking for a quick snapshot. And I wonder, am I weird on this? Like, how do you feel about asking for autographs and photos?
So I've never done it in person, like just like out in the world. I think that I'm the same as you. Like, I feel like it's weird. I feel like I'm like, encroaching on their time away from work, because for me, like, that's their job. So if it's away from like a movie premiere or away from like a set, I feel like I'm just like encroaching on their personal time. And like, I would never want somebody to like walk up to me and ask me to run data analytics or like offer them like analysis of a text, like, on a random Saturday night. But I will say the one place that I am totally fine with autographs and that I frequent quite often are cons. I love a good convention, and there I've definitely collected a number of autographs, a number of photos. But for me, like, it writes itself, right, in like my paradigm, because they're at work. They're there to be famous. They're there to sign autographs. They're there to take pictures. So like in my head, I can write that.
I think that makes sense. Oddly enough, that's when I feel the most awkward about it.
Really?
Is when there's like the line and I'm like, oh, great. I'm just another person who's coming through this line that you have to deal with. And, maybe you're changing my perspective on that. Maybe that's the appropriate time to do it.
Yeah, I feel like that's when they want you to do it. I think
Right.
they much rather you do it there than like go up to them like at sushi. Like, hey, can I buy you a roll? Like, no, it's weird.
I'm just imagining myself bothering Sandra Bernhardt while she's having sushi. And also what a mess that would be.
Yeah, she'd actually probably curse at you. But clearly from the outset of this movie, we're meant to see Rupert as somebody who's like just a little too obsessed with movies, just a little too obsessed with pop culture and the whole fame culture. And it's turned him really delusional because he thinks he can become what those that have been chosen to become famous, that have been successful, he thinks he can have what they have. And I gotta tell you, I had like some meta moments here where I really started to think about like us as a podcast, because we spend so many hours making this podcast. Like those of you out there, you have no idea the amount of time that we put into this, and we love it and we do it for a reason, but it's a lot of time, and it has become like this massive part of our lives. I was looking back and I've been with you guys for 5 years.
Yeah.
And the amount of hours that I have put in 5 years is a lot. And we do it for movies, like movies we're not in, like movies that came out years ago, right? But we still put so much time into it. And so De Niro in this opening scene looks at this other person that's there trying to get autographs, and he says, "That's your whole life. Getting autographs is your whole life. That's not my life." And I wondered how far that line goes. Like, where does it get drawn between like obsession and love of something? Because granted, like, we're not collecting autographs by doing this pod, but it still made me feel like kind of like seen in a bad way. Like maybe like there is a fine line between obsession and just enjoying podcasting. And maybe I should like, go on a walk or read like an extra book this week.
I feel like there's a balance there though. Like the King Bee will pop up occasionally in the Discord and he'll be just like, fuck that. I forget the dude's name. He's in Masters of the Air and he's in
Austin
Dune
Butler.
too. Austin Butler?
Yeah, he's really hating Austin Butler on Discord.
I thought it was somebody in the Discord. I'm like, who the fuck is Austin Butler? And then I thought, is that like a relief pitcher somewhere? No, he is an actor. He's in those movies. He was also Elvis, I believe.
Mhm.
He was the Elvis. I don't think we hate any of these people for their performances, nor do we think that like our opinions matter to anybody in these films. Even people who are in small 80s films who are totally reachable, you can get them to do a cameo, whatever. They don't give a shit about what we think. And I think that's a healthy balance there, right? They don't owe us anything and we don't think we have a relationship with them. But this is going to sound like I'm fucking Rupert living in my own delusion of fame here. There was another aspect to that interaction between Rupert and Jerry that I related to, and it was on the Jerry side of things. He gives a speech to Rupert in the car about how comedy isn't a business where you can start at the top. He's like, it's hard, it's crazy. You got to work your way up. And he's right, because there's refinement in the experience. You can't just start up at the top. And it reminded me of friends and family ask about being on the podcast, or they'll say, I know this guy who knows a lot about movies or who'd be great. He's such a great conversationalist. I got this friend. You should really try him out for your podcast. And I don't doubt that they're funny. I don't doubt that they probably know more about movies than I do. Have they been on a podcast for 5 years? For 7 years? Like, do they know Ash's mind to the point where they can subconsciously read her cues and her body language and know her breathing? No. And everybody thinks they're ready for primetime, but nobody is a natural at this. This is a thing that happens with experience. And I know that because we get better every year.
I agree. I remember the very first time I recorded with y'all, I was 2 houses ago because I've moved twice since then. And I sat in our master bedroom, which was also our office because it was a very small house. And I sat there and it was with you and with Roger Roper doing the preview for Westworld.
Mm.
And like, I was like talking all over you guys because I had no idea what you were doing. And like now, like I know the way that you're breathing if you're gonna start to say something else, or if you're done and you're ready for somebody to interject, or if like Big D's train is going like off, the track, and he is, his thinking, and it's like, okay, I'm gonna interrupt here to like bring it back, or he does the same for me or for you. Like it's so crazy how you create this chemistry. And the last thing I'll say to that is, to your point, I've got lots of friends who are movie people, but when they get in, and you and I have been a part of this, where we've had people that we've tried to like, I don't want to say like audition, but we've tried out before, right? Like we get with them and it's really difficult because people freeze when they get on the mic and they realize they have to like riff on what they're talking about. And so fuck all you people out there who think that this is some easy thing and like are nasty saying Gene and I are bullying Big D in the reviews right now on iTunes. This shit's hard, but it's fun. It's fun as shit.
And again, it's not to discourage anybody from doing a podcast, just to say that it takes years to get to the point where you're putting out something that's a quality product. And I mean that as a self-evaluation. I don't think my early stuff was very good. I think I've got a long way to go, but I don't think you could just hop in and do it, which is what Rupert's trying to do. Hoping to impress, Rupert invites a date, Rita, to accompany him when he arrives uninvited at Langford's country home. When Langford returns home to find Rupert and Rita settling in, he angrily tells them to leave. Rupert continues brushing off Langford's dismissals until Langford finally retorts that he only told Rupert he would call him so that he could get rid of him. Bitterly vowing to work 50 times harder, Rupert finally leaves.
So let's talk about De Niro here. De Niro plays this character in a way that is like really, really, really terrifying. There's this build in delusion in Rupert that feels like it could be funny, but the way that De Niro plays him, it's very disturbing. There's this disturbing kind of tension that's just like boiling right underneath the surface the entire time. And he reminds me of those guys that you meet out at bars that you get like the wiggles about. Like you get like really gross about them because they seem like, oh, well, they're nice guys. Like they're harmless. But like those are the ones that may like follow you home and murder you, right? And you just don't say anything to them because there's something off about them. Rupert has that vibe about him. And because of that, it's really fun to watch this movie because you're not sure if it's supposed to be a comedy or if it's supposed to be a thriller, or if it's supposed to be a horror film. And I don't say that as a critique. It's done intentionally in a way that keeps you guessing and on your toes, that makes it really fun to experience. Rupert is nice, but he's really messed up. And he's like a nicer version of De Niro's character in Taxi Driver. Like you can feel the danger there, but you're not quite sure. Like you can't put your thumb on it exactly what's wrong with him.
Violently agreeable.
Yeah.
If that's a thing.
Yes.
No, it's okay. I'll wait as long as it takes. What's implied there is that there's an expectation. I'll wait as long as it takes to get what I want. Oh, you want me to make a tape? I'll make you a tape, but you're going to listen to it and you're going to like it. He straddles that line so perfectly. And we should probably mention to the audience, if they haven't seen this movie, that the film presents Rupert's fantasies with zero indication of them being imagination. There's no like Wayne's World, like, diddle-doo, diddle-doo. So you're often left wondering if Rupert is confused between what's real and what's in his head. And to be clear, you can see that the scenario is so absurd that it is clearly to us, the audience, make-believe, right? But you don't know if he knows that or if he doesn't. Because there's a scene where he shows up at Jerry's country home. And you're like, does he really think Jerry wants to workshop with him? Like, did he really think that conversation actually happened and he invited him over while other guests were there and they were going to get some work done? Or does Rupert know he's showing up uninvited to Jerry's home where no guests will be because he's trying to be forceful about getting to where he wants to get? And that brings us to Rita, which is his romantic interest. And we talked in Elf about how weird it was that Jovi was into Buddy. And what I'm about to say might sound like I'm shit-talking Elf. I'm not. Elf is a different movie, a very, very different movie. It's a great movie. It's optimistic and it's Christmassy and it's delightful. But let's examine that Jovi-Buddy relationship through a realistic prism, right? She would run. She would run away. This is a New Yorker with quasi supermodel looks who is working in a department store. She encounters this giant older man who thinks he's an elf and breaks into the women's showers while she's naked in there. Okay. That's Elf. Rita, real world. Totally believable. She's Rupert's, school acquaintance. She has grown up. She's become disillusioned in life. She's working at this dead bar, living in a shitty apartment, dressing in cheap clothes. She's got bad tattoos. And so as you're looking at her, you go, she's trashy. She knows Rupert's a nut job. It's not like she's looking at him going, oh gosh, he's so charming. He took me out for coffee and thinks it's the best in the world. No, she knows he's crazy, but she doesn't have better options. And so she goes to the country home with him. She gets dressed up in what she thinks looks great. And of all the people in the world, Ash, I was most worried for her. Like she seemed the one where I was like, oh gosh, I hope he doesn't do anything to her. And he turns on her in a heartbeat. As soon as he thinks that Jerry's not okay with her or she's not playing along with the ruse, he turns on her. And I was very, very worried for her. Thankfully, spoiler alert, nothing happens to her. Also, interesting fact, that's Robert De Niro's first wife.
I didn't know that. I think it's interesting you bring up Elf, though, because I agree with you. We all said, like, in the real world, like, Buddy's arrested, right? Like, Buddy is a weirdo. I think the difference, though, is when you watch that, we're, like, in on the joke. We know that Buddy really thinks he's an elf because he grew up in the North Pole, right? So it's, like, a lot less creepy. I mean, here, we know for a fact that he's literally sitting in between, like, this Fatal Attraction style, couch where he's got like the cutouts of a guest and of Jerry on one side, and he's pretending that this is real. Like, this guy has problems, like severe problems.
I also loved that it was primetime Liza Minnelli. Perfect.
Yes.
Like, that's the guest you pick.
Jerry and Liza.
Exhausted with rejection, Rupert hatches a kidnapping plot with the help of Masha, a fellow Jerry stalker. Rupert demands that he be given the opening spot on that evening's episode of The Langford Show. The network's bosses, lawyers, and the FBI agree to Rupert's demands. Between the taping of the show and the broadcast, Masha has her dream date with Langford, who is taped to a chair in her parents' Manhattan townhouse. Langford convinces Masha to untie him under the guise of seduction and escapes. So another big star in this film is Jerry Lewis, and we haven't really gotten to him yet. I never have taken Jerry Lewis seriously as an actor, and part of that has to do with my age. Growing up, Jerry Lewis was that old guy from the muscular dystrophy telethons. That's all I knew him for. And then he, had to get medical treatment, and he ended up ballooning. It was all very weird. You'd occasionally see him maybe in a black and white movie being a goofball alongside Dean Martin. He is exceptional in this film. Jerry Lewis, I can't believe I'm saying these words, subtle. He spends a lot of time being quiet. Like when Sandra Bernhard is talking about fucking him on the dinner table, he's just staring at her, and it's a perfect performance. And you realize suddenly watching this performance that, holy shit, like Jerry Lewis wasn't doing slapstick because that's all he could do. It wasn't like just because that's the only thing he knows how to do. This is a guy who understood what the audience wanted at that time and decided to be really fucking good at it. This is a professional comedian, just like his character.
Yeah, I found that what was so interesting about him is you could feel like a little bit of like real life playing in here where like he was done with the game.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was such a just absolute like burden that the Jerry character carries throughout this entire movie, where you can just tell that he is so over people and fans and his job and what he's required to do. And he is very quiet in relationship to De Niro, because De Niro has to be the goof here. He has to have these really big moments. And Jerry Lewis, I was so shocked at how subdued he was and how powerful he was, like in those quiet moments.
I think there's something to that, the idea that this is him bringing a little bit of his true self through, because there's that scene where Robert De Niro is telling him off, where Rupert's telling him off, and he's like, fame has changed you and he's made you a horrible person. And he's like, I was like that before. Mm-hmm. It's like he's being real about it. And that brings us to the kidnapping, where I think the movie, it's good up until that point, then it becomes great. And when people talk about black comedy of the 80s, titles come up like Better Off Dead as far as like, suicide goes, Heathers as far as suicide and homicide go. But I'm going to declare The King of Comedy as the greatest black comedy of the 80s, if not all time. I absolutely love this movie. Starting with the kidnapping, things go from interesting and humorous to like laugh out loud funny. There's continuous slips back and forth between Rupert and Masha being competent kidnappers and then just absolute idiots. There's that hard candy incident where they discovered there's candies or like lozenges or something on Jerry and they ask permission to have some. They kidnap this man at fake gunpoint and are asking permission to have the candy. And then Masha's like, well, I don't want it right now, but like I'll have it later. It's just so dark. It's so wonderful. Masha's singing Come Rain or Come Shine. And then my favorite scene in the entire film where I was laughing the hardest is we got the lawyers, the producers, and the FBI agents, and they're arguing over what to do with the kidnapping. And it felt like an episode of like Curb Your Enthusiasm where the lawyer jumps up. He's like, I'm the one who's suing. I'm the lawyer. And they're all disagreeing with each other. I think the movie catches this frenzied pace at this point, and it's something we don't see that often in film.
I mean, Death to Smoochie, I argue, is the best dark comedy of all time. I think that movie is utterly brilliant. Someone commission it every time.
It's been a few years. I'll keep my mind open on that one.
The penis cookies alone. They're rocket ships. Like, it's the greatest scene. I will say it went a bit much at times for me, where it went and it crossed the line from being a dark comedy into trying to be too much of a comedy. And this is going to be my largest critique. The only reason this is not a zero white movie for me is because of the kidnapping scene. Because when De Niro and Bernhardt are together with Jerry Lewis, it's utter perfection. But when Bernhardt is left alone, there are these moments where it gets a little too far into that slapsticky stage where the movie starts to feel like it doesn't know what it wants to be, because you've got so much time being built of how scary this guy is and how like you don't know what he's going to do. And then he leaves. And I mean, Sandra Bernhard, I think, is a hilarious actress, but I just thought some of that was a bit ridiculous.
I couldn't think that well through my boner.
I mean, she's hot. She looks good.
She looks real good. Especially when she's chasing him down the street. Jerry!
Mm-hmm.
Jerry!
She looks good.
Meanwhile, Rupert's act is well received by the studio audience. He closes his act by confessing to the audience that he kidnapped Langford to break into show business. As the audience still laughs, Rupert responds by saying, tomorrow, you'll know I wasn't kidding and you'll all think I'm crazy, but I figure it this way. Better to be a king for a night than a schmuck for a lifetime. Having shown the broadcast to Rita at her bar, Rupert proudly submits to his arrest as the FBI agents profess distaste for his jokes.
So Charlie said at the beginning that if you were a fan of the Joker movie that Joaquin Phoenix stars in, that you would probably like this film because it took a lot from it. And I had no clue how influenced Todd Phillips's Joker was by this movie. And of course, it's very interesting that De Niro plays the host of the talk show in Joaquin Phoenix's Joker. And he comes in and Joaquin Phoenix does this routine. And there's this really interesting, like I wanted to go back and rewatch that because there's this really interesting play on both of those films and the way they interact. And there are really serious vibes throughout the movie about whether you're questioning whether or not Rupert Pumpkin is going to be any good or not, or if he's truly unhinged and just going to like go nuts and shoot somebody in the studio audience, like spoiler alert, what happens in Joaquin Phoenix's version. And it's played so well how when he finally does get up there that he's actually pretty fucking good. Like that's such a huge, really smart twist that this guy actually is a fairly decent stand-up. You know, he really is able to sell the story of who he is. He's very relatable. The audience loves him. And it's such a mind fuck of how this would actually happen in real life. Because look at the way that we love a crazy person or we love an underdog story. And I mean underdog intentionally, like a Tanya Harding type underdog, right? Where they've done something really shitty, but for some reason we still want to be a part of them. Because what are the big documentaries that have like made shit tons of money? The Casey Anthony documentary Everybody wanted to watch and see where Casey Anthony is now, right? You just had Gypsy Rose Blanchard, who came out of jail and she got the book deal and she's like glowing up and all over the television and got married and divorced in like 4 months. It's been a whirlwind for Gypsy. She's got to be exhausted out there, right? But I think that shows us that like the Rupert Pumpkin thing, like even after we found out that he kidnapped Jerry, legit he'd be fucking famous and would have a show on fucking HBO.
I love that they made him good, but not too good, right? He was exactly as funny as he needed to be. And the King of Comedy makes this brilliant decision not to show us Rupert's stand-up act until the climax of the film. It teases us multiple times, but a lesser film, it opens the movie with Rupert bombing. You get to see how bad he is at comedy, and then you kind of go into this. But we never see that. We don't get to hear his set when he's practicing in the basement. You just get the setups to the joke a little bit as he's talking to that wall of faces. We don't get to hear the tape that he turned in, right? We get to hear the intro to the act, but not the act itself. And even when they're recording the TV performance live, we don't get to hear it. We don't get to see it until it's on the TV in Rita's bar. They show it on that analog TV quality instead of film, where the movie keeps moving back and forth between those two types. It's very, very nostalgic. It kind of shows you just that filter, that cheapness of what TV looks like versus real life. It's absolutely mesmerizing. And again, it's just a reminder, this is Scorsese.
Well, and it's also a reminder that TV is not the real world, right? Like they do such a good job at that juxtaposition of him there in front of that curtain in that Tonight Show format, and then him in the bar. And I think too, we have to remember like the type of comedy that he's doing is the type of comedy that like Carson loved. That Johnny Carson, this is the type of stand-up that made it on Johnny Carson. Like there was nothing political. There was nothing, groundbreaking or like absurd or anything like that. I mean, you had a couple instances with like Andy Kaufman's, but for the most part, like Rupert Pumpkin is exactly the type of comedian that would have played to Carson's audience.
And speaking of that era of television, that Johnny Carson era, we see this look with Rupert. We see it with Jerry. There's a very refined New York early 80s look that's a little bit flashy, but it's still, classy with the cufflinks and the ties. When you look at other Scorsese movies, style is always there, but it's a very different style. We talk about Raging Bull or Goodfellas or Casino, right? It's hard to see where King of Comedy fits into the Scorsese pantheon. But once you start watching it, the touches are there. His fingerprints are there. And one of those is that costuming. It's just different. Everyone in this movie is dressed perfectly for their role, and the outfits are a treat to the eye. It's a beautiful film to look at. I'm honestly taking this film as style influence for my 2024. Men with accessories, gold jewelry. Please make gold jewelry come back. It's so cool. Mustaches. There's just a sharp, refined sleaze to the entire picture that fits so well with that 80s New York. And I don't think I've ever seen De Niro or Jerry Lewis or Sandra Bernhard look any cooler than they do in this film. Also, Shelley Hack, who plays Miss Long, the secretary, perfectly corporate boho. She looks great. Everybody in this movie, fantastic.
I mean, can we just talk for a second about De Niro's ties? Like, they're so fucking good.
The only person that looks like trash in this is his wife.
Mm-hmm.
She's supposed to. The film ends with a news report of Rupert's crime set to a montage of storefronts stalking his autobiography, King for a Night, which states that Rupert still considers Langford his friend and mentor, and that he is currently weighing several attractive offers, including comedy tours and a film adaptation of his memoir. Rupert later takes the stage for a TV special with a live audience, where an announcer enthusiastically introduces him as the King of Comedy, while Rupert prepares to address his audience.
We talk about movie stars, and there's not a lot of them left. I mean, you've got Brad Pitt still, but, he's kind of, complicated now. George Clooney's getting old. He's getting up there and he's directing. Leo, he's entered into his kind of like puffy face Jack Nicholson, era. And I think that the ones that you have, I mean, Timothée Chalamet arguably is the biggest movie star that exists today with Dune and with all the things he's doing. He's absolutely fantastic and arguably is like a movie star because he's both can act incredibly well and is able to make really big money. He was in Wonka.
They redid Wonka?
Yeah, as a musical.
See, people, Professional podcasters here.
Come with
Obsessed
me
with film.
and you'll see. I am still absolutely obsessed with Jake Gyllenhaal and Ryan Gosling. I think they're wonderful. I think they're amazing actors. You also have Pedro Pascal, who everybody really loves. You know, he's your zaddy or whatever. He's great. But true movie stars, like, we don't have them like we used to. You know, the age of De Niro and Pacino and Nicholson and Hopkins, like, that was just a different level of drama. It was a different level of acting, and it's a different level of like commandment on the screen. Like, De Niro commands every fucking scene that he's in. And the ending of this movie really reminds you of that, because he's incredibly powerful as he's sitting there and he's going through these delusions, and they start introducing him in different ways. So they first introduce him as the king of comedy, and then it introduced him as Rupert Pumpkin. And then you realize that he's imagining all of it and that it's just delusion after delusion, but he sells it in a way that both makes you like excited that he made it, and then it makes you feel really sad that he didn't. And then it makes you feel really freaked out that this dude's going to get out in 6 fucking years. And what is he going to do?
This is not Meet the Fockers. He's not funny in that kind of way. He's funny in a sort of scary way. There's a bit of innocence and naivete to it. It's a very complex role. And there's a scene where Rupert is talking with the FBI. He is fully identifying himself. He is admitting that he kidnapped Jerry. He is threatening to kill Jerry if he doesn't get his TV time. But he's doing it in such a matter-of-fact way. It's so dark. It's so quirky. It's so hilarious. And it is De Niro being funny in De Niro's way. I think it's the sort of thing that has to be seen to be understood. And I'm finding, as we've done these 380-something episodes of Shat the Movies, that the true magic in film, the true magic in a performance, is when I try to describe it to somebody and it doesn't sound that funny, but if you saw it, you would understand what's magical about it. And he's got that. Well, now's the time in the podcast where we give our Shat scores for The King of Comedy. The Shat scores are our way of telling you how many wipes this movie takes to get out of perspective. Butts, 0 wipes is a perfect movie. It's good old-fashioned American fun. And 5 wipes is an absolute disaster of a movie. It's when you're trying to make a demo tape and your mom keeps interrupting. Ash, we'll start with you. What is your wipe score for The King of Comedy?
I mean, I think this movie is nearly perfect. It's got insane performances. The plot's fantastic. It's so well done. It moves at such a clip. I had no idea that it was already over, right? Like, it was so fast. I think that clearly the reason this wasn't a success when it came out is because it was so ahead of its time. I think that Scorsese and all of them, they knew that celebrity culture was becoming a thing, but it hadn't yet become what it has become. Think about the big moments. You've got Princess Diana being chased by, the paparazzi and killed. You've got that leading up to today with like the Kardashians and influencers and all these people who literally their entire job is to be famous, not famous for like doing anything. Just famous to be famous. And this movie really gives a bit of a foreshadowing of all of that. The only issue I have with it is I do think there's some tonality issues with Bernhardt and like her kidnapping scenes that I do think takes away from some of the fun scary. But that is the most minor of minor complaints. Like, I think that this movie is brilliant. I am so glad I got to watch it. Charlie, thank you so much for introducing this to us. So I'm going to come with a very respectable, very near perfect 0.5 wipes.
That's so funny because the points where you saw the flaw is exactly where I thought the movie hit its peak. When it lightened up, there's a point where the FBI agents are like critiquing the jokes and making jokes of their own. It gets a little bit silly, and I really appreciated that little dose of levity right there. It was injected at just the right spot. So exactly what you said, Ash, but I loved Bernhardt in her kidnap scenes. I loved it getting a little silly. I love the movie not taking itself too seriously. So I'm going to go 0 wipes on this with a perfect score. And between your half a wipe and my 0 wipes, it gives us a 1/4 wipe for The King of Comedy. Well done, Charlie. So with a 1/4 wipe, Charlie, that ties The King of Comedy in the number 6 spot with several films that are all of terrific pedigree. Jurassic Park, Wayne's World, Grosse Pointe Blank, and Fargo. It is slightly better than Terminator 2 and not quite as good as Alien.
This feels exactly right. And if you're out there going, what? Y'all are nuts. Go watch it. Like, genuinely. Like, this is one you haven't heard of. And if you have heard of it, you may just not remember it. Like, this movie's fucking good.
Yeah, and for those people who think the Terminator 2 score is crazy, Raj and I both gave Terminator 2 half a wipes. It is not a perfect movie. It's really damn good. It's incredibly impressive for when it came out. But little things like the thumbs up at the end, come on.
It's so sad.
Anyway, well, thank you, Charlie, for your commission. Moving on, we've got a few voicemails that we're going to try to get to. And the first one comes from James from Woodstock.
Hey, Shat crew. James from Woodstock here. I called about a year ago, and I realized I sounded a bit overenthusiastic, so I'll try to contain myself here. Anyways, I know Gene asked if I had ever been to Neo in Chicago. So there was a time when I was frequenting a lot of shows at like the Metro and the Riv and the Aragon, and I definitely hit up all the clubs. So if you remember a big, long-haired, bearded dude with a backwards Cubs hat and a black trench coat, kind of looked like Silent Bob, that was probably me. Anyways, I digress. And I happened to recently rewatch a movie from my childhood that I'm on the verge of commissioning. I can recall my dad renting the movie Ladybugs simply because of our mutual love for Rodney Dangerfield. Really nothing else. And as I remember as a kid just watching a silly comedy where Rodney Dangerfield does his shtick, after rewatch, I couldn't get over the amount of offensive jokes literally being thrown out almost every other minute. Now, I am in no way a social justice warrior or whatsoever, but I feel like this movie aged so terribly could in no way be made today and might be worth your opinions on it because holy shit, it pretty much offends everyone and everything. Gotta maybe commission this or maybe a trauma movie, but I'll get into that another time. Keep up all the magic that you do. And Ash, I want to say good to hear you back. Much love, Shat peeps.
So, randomly, I've seen the movie Ladybugs like 50 times because I had a friend of mine who was obsessed with Jonathan Brandis, who was also in this movie. And he has to dress in drag in order to play soccer on Rodney Dangerfield's team. Absolutely commission it. I want to see what Gene Lyons thinks of Ladybugs.
I was always perplexed by how many women in my life and girls in my life when I was a kid were into this movie. I've never seen it, but we're into Ladybugs. Now it makes sense. Jonathan Brandis is in the film, and everybody loved Jonathan Brandis.
Sequest DSV.
He was the Timothy Chalamet of his generation, if you will.
He really was the Timothy Chalamet of his generation.
There you go.
Well done, sir.
I've never seen either of them in a movie, but I know that. And James, as far as Neo goes, I'm going to go back through my photo archives from the Chicago years and see if I spot anything like that. I think I would have noticed only because when I lived in Chicago, I was a Sox fan. So I wouldn't notice anybody in Neo with a Cubs hat on. Kind of sticks out at a goth club if you're wearing a Cubs hat. But I'm glad that we shared the dance floor. And when I wear my Neo dance floor pendant, I will always think of you. Thanks for calling in. Next up, we have a voicemail from Mike A. from New York.
Hey guys, this is Mike A. from New York. I just started listening to Shat the Movies 3 weeks ago, and I am hooked. I love you guys. I think it's great to hear about some of my favorite movies from a different perspective. You guys are funny. I just finished listening to the podcast for Speed, and it was excellent. Speed is one of my favorite action movies. I've been listening to everything from Splash, Bowfinger, The Warriors, and it's very insightful. I love this show, and I'm a new fan. I'm gonna keep listening. I do have an idea. I don't know if you guys ever considered maybe doing something about 70s movies, stuff like Star Wars and Shaft, Superman. I would love to hear your perspective on those films. So that's just an idea. Anyway, keep up the good work, and like I said, I'm going to keep listening. And I love what you guys are doing.
OG Shat.
OG Shat. Yeah. So, Mike, Ash and Big D always beating the drum to venture forward into the 2000s. I am much more inclined to go back into the 70s. And it's nothing to do with the fact that I just feel like cinema was a little bit different then. However, I would say that it does sort of run contrary to the mission of the podcast in the sense that I wasn't alive then. Ash wasn't alive then. If you do like 70s movies, we have done Westworld, we've done Alien, and a few others that are in the mix. So please do check out those 70s podcasts. I would welcome it more, but I think just like the 2000s, they'd have to be special occasions.
2000s. 2004. We need to go up to 2004. Write in. Leave a voicemail. Peer pressure Gene.
Mike, thank you so much for the kind words. And if you have a 70s movie idea, let us know. I think you mentioned Shaft and a few others. Happy to at least consider them. Next up, we have one from Maeve, and this one's about St. Elmo's Fire.
Hi, guys. I just wanted to say hi and to say that I really want to commission a movie, but I'm really impatient and I know that I'm going to have to wait till 2025. I want to commission 2 movies. One of them is Shag, starring Bridget Fonda, and the other one is, funnily enough, St. Elmo's Fire, which then I heard Ash say today that she wanted someone to commission, and I'm begging to do so. But you all planned out for ages. Have those plans ever change?
I mean, if we get, Pearls and Ali Sheedy in a sex scene, I feel like that's a reason for a special film. St. Elmo's Fire is like one of the most important 80s films. I think we should do a special one. Rob Lowe is so sexy in St. Elmo's Fire with his little saxophone and drug problem.
Oh my God. All right, maybe we'll give it a consideration. But it sounds like Ash is really pulling for St. Elmo's Fire. And
I love you, Maeve.
Maybe we could fast track that one for you as a special episode.
Let's
if you
do
don't
it for
mind
my birthday. My birthday's coming up and your birthday's coming up. So we'll do it in between. We'll split the difference. We'll do Shag for your birthday and we'll do St. Elmo's Fire for mine.
Maybe if you don't mind it being, that's my birthday movie now, Shag?
Well, you said that she was hot. So you're welcome. Happy birthday.
No, you said Rob Lowe was hot. I was just saying Bridget Fonda's in it.
Well, Rob Lowe is.
I think as we consider these like special requests, if we're allowed to do them as live streams and we're allowed to do them without editing, I think we can get them pumped out a lot faster. But it's really going to take an audience push to make that happen. So maybe if you guys want to write in at host@shatpod.com or leave us voicemail on our SpeakPipe feature on the website, shatpod.com, let us know what you think about special releases. Raw. Ash, what do we have coming up next week?
Well, Gene, next week we continue with 80s comedies, and we are going to be delving into the world of 1988. It is a film where Harry Crumb descends from a long line of sleuths, but the well-intentioned private detective tends to turn the simplest case into a disaster. That's why Harry's maniacal boss, Elliot Drazen, selects him to investigate the kidnapping of a rich heiress. Again, that came out in 1988, and this one is commissioned by Mark L. Porcupine.
All right. Well, Porcupine, I hope we do your movie justice. Thank you so much for your commission. Thank you, Charlie, for your commission. Thank you to all the commissioners who make this podcast possible and all the prospective commissioners who wrote in. That concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media, share with a friend. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat the Movies. Email us, host@shatpod.com. Support the podcast by shopping our Amazon affiliate link, buying our merch, or by commissioning your own movie. Find all information by visiting our website, shatpod.com. Also, check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Lovecraft Country, Westworld, True Detective, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, and Watchmen. Find all information on our website, shatpod.com/TV, wherever fine podcasts can be found, including Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by Apple Podcasts, please leave a 5-star review. And before we close out, I want to send a special shout out to Jen and Patrick and the kids out there in Hawaii who just lost Cheese the cat. She's lived a very long life. We know how much it hurts to lose a pet, and we are here with you. Thank you so much for the support over the years, and we hope your days get a little bit brighter. On behalf of my co-hosts, Ash and Big D, I'm Gene Lyons. Join us next week for the following movie.
Marie?
A woman in danger. A fortune in ransom.
I don't care what they want. I'll pay anything.
A mystery in the making.
You don't know anything about this kidnapping, do you?
There's only one man tough enough to intimidate the suspects. Smart enough to uncover the clues. Brave enough to catch the kidnappers.
Who is that?
Harry Crumb. That's right, the Harry Crumb.
He's the last in a long line of great detectives.
My reputation precedes me. Otherwise, I'd be late for all my appointments.
He's a master of disguise.
I am Bijou Delioche.
Could you spell that, please?
I don't think so. Try it with a D.
His mind is like a steel trap.
You find that crazy typewriter, and you'll have your kidnappers.
It's no wonder they took her. Just look at her. She's perfect.
Perfect? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, look at the size of her head. She must be enormous.
You get paid for this?
Usually, yeah. Are you a fly fisherman? Fishing is my life.
Who's Harry Crumb? He's the best at tracking down the worst.
Nimble yet clumsy. Cunning yet naive.
He's a man's man, loved by women. He's coming on strong. He's coming through. And he's coming to a theater near you.
It was short. I didn't understand that part because then it was long again.
It just looked like she tucked it up.
Women.